All right, so welcome. This is 2 Samuel, session 8. And we're going to be going through chapters 15 through 17 today. Up to this point, we've seen David has been established as king. There really are no more threats from the house of Saul. That has been eliminated, taken care of, unified under David's banner. And even a lot of the external threats have now been taken care of as well. The Edomites and the Ammonites and the Moabites and those that are up in the Aram and Damascus area, the Syrians. There's peace with the Phoenicians. The Philistines are kind of taken care of, and then even some of the peoples to the south. And so there are really not. David's taking care of the internal threats. With Saul, he's taking care of the external threats through God's leading and guiding his military might. And then we transitioned a couple weeks ago and we saw David's personal struggles and some of the things that he did in his personal life that sinned and went against God. Again, what makes David the man after God's own heart are not because he was ever perfect. The Bible never paints him or portrays him as that, but because he continually seeks after God. He turns to God with asking for forgiveness and repentance. Unlike his predecessors, Saul, who doubled down on his sins and made excuses. David apologized. He goes and seeks God. That's what makes David a man after God's heart. We see that there's going to be Nathan prophesied that there would be struggles and problems within David's own house. Last week, we saw that starting to come to play with Absalom and his sister Tamar and his son Amnon, who raped his half-sister Tamar. And then Absalom killed Amnon a couple years later in revenge. Amnon was then exiled and eventually brought back, but still kind of distant. And then at the end of chapter 14, we saw how David and Absalom kind of reconciled there. But we see that even in David's own house now are where the threats come or where there's discord. And so that's what we're going to pick up today. So it's, yeah, Rusty.
Why did it take him 2 years to kill his brother?
Patience. Have you ever heard the old adage? The question was, why did it take Absalom so long for revenge? I think there's an old adage, right? It's that revenge is a dish best served cold. To wait for the right and the opportune time.
You seem though after he knew he did that to her, you want to go kill her right away.
He did, and this was stirring in his heart for 2 years. It had poisoned him for 2 years, but he was waiting for the opportune moment where he knew he would succeed. And so he was willing to be patient in that as well.
2 years is a long time.
Long time. Unfortunately, I've seen families hold grudges much longer than that and seek for revenge much longer than that. I think you have too, in the midst of those things, when people feel a perceived or a wrong against them, whether it's logical or not. They hold on to that much longer than years, decades or lifetimes, unfortunately. So that's not unusual for that. I don't think that's out of place to think about that. So let's go ahead and open with prayer. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Thank you for being faithful, even in the midst of people and persons and us who are too often not faithful, who seek after our own hearts, our own ways, and don't seek after and lift up yours. Lord, when this happens, we ask for your mercy, your grace, your forgiveness. Restore us, renew us, lead us, so that we may always be people after your heart. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. All right, so I asked the question there at the top of the study guide. What do you think about the adage, discretion is the better part of valor, or sometimes it's the best part of valor, depending on how that saying goes. Discretion is the best part of valor. And how have you seen that in life? So I'd encourage you just with people around you in the room, and then I'll split you into a couple groups online. Discuss that. Discretion is the best or the better part of valor. And we're going to go ahead and Great. I'll break into groups here and give you a few minutes to just talk about that. So discretion is the better part of valor. As we kind of think about that discretion, being discreet or being wise in the midst of that is the better part of valor, being brave, being wise, being patient, whatever that might look like with discretion, not just flying off the handle. It's one thing to be brave, and it's another thing to be ignorant as you kind of just run bullheaded into a situation without assessing what's going on first. And so just thought that was maybe a good way to start or talk about today, because we'll look at David's actions today of how he responds to a situation. And even with this conversation on Tuesday night, there were a lot of questions like, well, why did David act that way? And I think while we're not told what David's motivations are, I think David is really trying to use discretion to do what's best for him and for his people, even in the midst of an extremely difficult circumstance. He doesn't just draw a sword and start hacking people or fighting. He's really trying to be wise in the midst of that. So I think that'll come to play a little bit and might help us understand maybe his motivation a little bit, or at least guess at his motivation a little bit here, as the Bible does not explicitly tell us why David does some of the things he does in this section. All right, so just to remember, just as we talk through some of the key players here, David is king. His son Absalom has returned from exile, and he is one of the oldest sons of David. Whether or not the oldest living son, we're not 100% sure, but he's one of the oldest sons of David. And he is the major other player during this time. We'll get introduced to a couple other people or reintroduced to some of them, and we'll make some connections as we go along. All right. Would somebody, how about somebody online for us, read this first part of 2 Samuel 15, verses 1 through 16.
I can, Pastor.
1 through 6, sorry, 15 verses 1 through 6. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks.
After this, Absalom got himself a chariot and horses, and 50 men to run before him. And Absalom used to rise early and stand beside the way of the gate. And when any man had a dispute to come before the king for judgment, Absalom would call to him and say, "From what city are you?" And when he said, "Your servant is of such and such a tribe in Israel," Absalom would say to him, "See, your claims are good and right, but there is no man designated by the king to hear you." Then Absalom would say, "Oh, that I were judge in the land. Then every man with a dispute or cause might come to me, and I would give him justice." And whenever a man came near to pay homage to him, he would put out his hand and take hold of him and kiss him. Thus Absalom did to all of Israel who came to the king for judgment. So Absalom stole the hearts of the men of Israel.
All right, thank you. So as we look at this section here, what does Absalom do? So Absalom has been restored to the king. He uses this newfound status to go and win the hearts of the people. But before he does that, he gets a chariot. All right. You don't really need a chariot in the hill country of Israel, because there's all these hills and winding paths. So maybe it's a little nice, but it's not very far. But a chariot is a military vehicle, and it's the vehicle of a king. And so today, think about getting the most ostentatious vehicle he could find. And he's got spinners on it. He's even got those little glow things underneath that light it up so that everyone knows when Absalom is coming, right? That's what's going on here. And then not only that, he gets an entourage around him. He gets 50 men that will just run before him. So he's always got a posse of people around him, looking all the part of a king, a ruler, a lord, an important person. This is all about the show here. And then he sets himself up at the gate like a judge. So people came from all over Israel in order to have their case heard before the ultimate judge, who was David, the king, right? And so Absalom sets himself up at the gate, and he sees this person coming. He's like, Hey, how's it going? Where are you from? By the way, I'm Absalom. I'm the king's son. Oh, you're from there? Oh, I love it there. I have a really good friend there. Do you know such and such? Oh, that's such a great place. What are you coming to Jerusalem for? Oh, to hear an audience before the king? Oh man, I hope that you can get in. It's really tough to see the king. He doesn't really see that many people. You know, what's your case? Oh, if I were a judge, your case, you are in the right 100%. If I were the judge, I would rule in your favor 100%. And then would bow down before him. Oh, thank you for hearing us, Absalom. Thank you for hearing. Oh, don't bow down before me. I'm like your brother. And gives him a hug and greets him and treats him like an equal. All right. And so he wins the hearts of the people. And it talks about, kind of steals the hearts. He is being deceptive here. He's implying he could do a better job than David, but he doesn't even allow these people to come before David. He intercepts David and say, oh yeah, see, man, there's nobody really to hear him. Well, they don't even get a chance to go before David. David doesn't even get a chance to hear their cases and rule justly. And it's one thing for Absalom to say that he would 100% rule before them, because he's not having both parties. He's not having to have the consequences of his rulings. He can just tell everyone. So if Rusty and my mom were having an argument and Rusty's coming in, I would talk to Rusty and say, Absalom talk to Rusty and say, absolutely, Rusty, I would rule in your favor. Rusty goes inside, hoping to get an audience with David. And then my mom would come in and I'd hear her side. And I'd say, absolutely, I would rule 100% in your favor, right? Because he doesn't actually have to make a real decision. So he's being 100% politics. He's undermining the confidence in his father David. He's puffing himself up and he's making himself light while putting David down. And David doesn't even get a chance to respond because he short circuits the justice process. The very thing that Absalom is claiming is wrong, Absalom is interfering with and making wrong. And so he's kind of fulfilling David's criticisms, his criticisms of David's system by what he's doing. So that's what Absalom is doing. Now, whether David knows this, we're not really told. If he doesn't know it, he probably is not as well informed as he should. If he knows about it, it's another case where David sees wrong or injustice and where he's blind because it's his kids and he doesn't fix it how he should. All right, yeah, Rusty. Microphone's coming.
You would think with 50 men that one of them would go ahead and go back to David.
Well, David probably knew about the chariot and the men, but whether this part with the judge and the, trying to set himself up as a judge and at the gate, Absalom's picked guys that are going to be loyal to him. They're not. If David hears about it, it probably wouldn't be from one of them, but it'd be from somebody else.
So they all knew he was.
Well, it's hard to hide 50 men in a chariot. In the hill country of David's going to know that that's going on. Again, David has blind spots when it comes to his kids. All right, let's keep going on. Somebody in the room this time, would you be read for us 7 through 12 of 2 Samuel? 2 Samuel 7 through 12. Yeah, Judy, thank you.
And at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king, please let me go and pay my vow, which I have vowed to the Lord in Hebron. For your servant vowed a vow while I lived at Geshur in Aram, saying, if the Lord will indeed bring me back to Jerusalem, then I will offer worship to the Lord. The king said to him, go in peace. So he arose and went to Hebron. But Absalom sent secret messengers throughout all the tribes of Israel, saying, as soon as you hear the sound of the trumpet, then say, Absalom is king at Hebron. With Absalom went 200 men from Jerusalem who were invited guests, and they went in their innocence and knew nothing. And while Absalom was offering the sacrifices, he sent for Ahithophel the Gileadite, David's counselor from the city Gilo. And the conspiracy grew strong, and the people with Absalom kept increasing.
You nailed that name. That was awesome. Ahithophel. That's exactly right. Nice job. So Absalom goes to, he tries to have an opportunity, he creates an opportunity for a coup, is basically what he's doing here. He says he has to repay a vow at Hebron. He sends messengers throughout Israel to ready those that are loyal to him, right? That he's been gaining a following. He's been winning the hearts of the people. He knows who those that are committed to him and like, hey, Absalom, if you ever want to make a move, I'm with you. He knows who these guys are. He's been talking with them at the gate, day after day after day as they come in different places. He's got a network of spies. And so he sends messages to them saying, be ready because there's something about to happen. And when it happens, I want you to move with me. And so he's well organized from throughout all of the land of Israel. Does that mean all of Israel is loyal to Absalom? No. But are those loyal to Absalom, are they organized and motivated? Yeah. And those that with David, they're kind of clueless in the midst of this. So he invites then 200 prominent people to his feast. Fulfilling a vow is and having a feast. We've seen feasts before. These were honorific things. These are things that they did. You'd throw a feast. And so David, he does this. He was born in Hebron, if you remember that. So he's going back to where he was born to throw this feast. Whether David should have been clued in or not, it was not unusual to throw a feast to celebrate a vow or to give thanks to the Lord for different things. If you remember back to, if you've studied 1 Samuel, Saul was had the pattern or the practice of having a feast every new moon, where he would invite prominent people to join him and be part of that. So for Absalom to have this for a vow with the Lord ever returns me to the land of Israel, I will honor the Lord, throw a feast, and give thanks to the Lord in that way. So that's not out of character. It's not out of the norm. And he invites prominent people to be part of that. The king's son invites it to a feast. Wow, that's an honored thing. It's the event of the year, so they're going to want to go. So he invites all of these dignitaries and influential people from Jerusalem to come to the feast in Hebron. Now they unwittingly are going there, thinking they're being honored, where Absalom then, while he's there, has himself anointed king. And now they're participants and witnesses of it just by their presence. They are seen to be endorsing Absalom. So that's what it means to grow strong. So it wasn't mean that they thought Absalom should be king. They were backing him as king. They went going to a feast, and they were wrapped up in all of this movement to make Absalom their king. And now they're stuck. But their presence adds to the validity of what Absalom's doing. Yeah, Barb?
Two things. One, was it only men that were invited, or were there wives and children, and do we know?
I don't know for sure. Yeah.
And also,
The prominent people would probably be men. So there might have been more beyond the men that went, but the 200 prominent people would have been men. Yeah.
I forgot the other one.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And so, and then Absalom also has something else. He has Ahithophel. Now, Ahithophel is one of David's advisors. He's part of David's inner circle. He's Ahithophel, the Gilonite, who probably helped orchestrate the whole thing. So he goes also, leaves David's inner circle and goes to join Absalom. Now here's a couple interesting things. Ahithophel of Gilo is listed as the father of Eliam. And does anybody remember who, we've seen that name once before and you probably won't remember it. No, good guess though. Eliam is the same name as Bathsheba's father. And they're of Gilo. Both of these guys are of Gilo, as they're listed in some of these places of mighty men and everything else. Ahithophel is Eliam's father, and more than in both those places. So it's not 100% guaranteed, but it's very likely, very probable that this is Bathsheba's grandfather. Now, what that means, we're left to conjecture. We're left to just think, does he still hold some grudge against what David did to Bathsheba and her family? Or is there something else? This, like I said, this could be different people, but likelihood from the same names from the same city is unlikely. So that is, Ahithophel of Gilo is here, but then at the end of 2 Samuel, in 2 Samuel 23, verse 34, you get in 2 Samuel 23, you get a list of David's mighty men, those that followed with David, that were the men of valor. And in 33, you get Shamna the Harite, Ahiam the son of Sharar the Harite, and then you get Eliphalet the son of Ahashabai of Maacah, Eliam the son of Ahithophel of Gilo. And again, to have that same name in both places, the likelihood is this is his son. And then we get Eliam is the father of Bathsheba, back a couple sections ago when we were looking at that. So it's possible it's different people, but the likelihood is it's very unlikely that would be the case. And so what motives he has, we can only imagine or guess. But this interesting, what a tangled web we weave. And the effects of David's sins, I think, just shows how it affects other people, not just Bathsheba, not just Uriah, but their whole families. And so was that the motivation for why Ahithophel went and helped Absalom? We don't know. But in my mind, it seems pretty likely that there's some motivation there. All right. Any thoughts, questions here about what Absalom does? So he was very patient when he went after his brother. He was well organized when he went after his brother. And the same seems to be the case here too, doesn't it? He's going after David, but he's doing it in the most opportune time once everything is ready. He may have other vices, but he has patience. That is something he has in his favor. So it's a question. It says, there's a question on that. And Rusty asked how many years. So in verse 7, it says at the end of 4 years, Absalom said to the king. So, but there's an interesting note on that. So I'll talk about the possibilities here. So that could be at the end of 4 years. So like 4 years after he came back home. So this would have been 2 years after he kind of reunited with David. But the note says that the Hebrew actually says 40 years. So at the end of 40 years of what then is the question? One of the commentators, one of the notes says, maybe at the end of kind of 40 years of David's reign, so it's near the end of David's reign, that Absalom does this, and that David might be around 60 years old at this point when this is happening. Absalom then is probably 35, 40, somewhere around in that age when this is happening. That might be more likely. Those are a couple of the possibilities. Either way, it's not been a short amount of time. A couple years at the shortest, Absalom has been kind of plotting this and planning this. Yeah. Could have been even longer. All right, let's keep going. How about somebody online for us? If you could read 2 Samuel 15, verses 13 through 23.
I can read.
Thank you.
A messenger came and told David, "The hearts of the men of Israel are with Absalom." Then David said to all his officials who were with him in Jerusalem, "Come, we must flee, or none of us will escape from Absalom. We must leave immediately, or he will move quickly to overtake us and bring ruin upon us and put the city to the sword." The king's officials answered him, "Your servants are ready to do whatever our lord the king chooses." The king set out with his entire household following him, but he left 10 concubines to take care of the palace. So the king set out with all the people following him, and they halted at a place some distance away. All his men marched past him, along with all the Kerethites and Pelethites, and all the 600 Gittites who had accompanied him from Gath, marched before the king. The king said to Ittai the Gittite, "Why should you come along with us? Go back and stay with King Absalom. You are a foreigner and exile from your homeland. You came only yesterday, and today shall I make you wander about with us when I do not know where I am going? Go back and take your countrymen. May kindness and faithfulness be with you." But Ittai replied to the king, "As surely as the Lord lives, and as my lord the king lives, whatever my lord the king may be, whether it means life or death, there will your servant be." David said, "Go ahead, march on." So Ittai the Gittite marched on with all his men and the families that were with him. The whole countryside wept aloud as all the people passed by. The king also crossed the Kidron Valley, and all the people moved on toward the desert.
All right, thank you. All right, so what we have here as we're thinking about this is David's flight. And this is one of the things about like discretion is the better part of valor, right? David didn't say, you know what, Absalom is trying this coup. We're going to entrench in. We're going to fight to the death. David realizes and sees the organization that Absalom has. He knows if he stays in Jerusalem, it's not only death for him, but death for his entire household and government. And so they pack up and they leave. Household and his government leaders, and they flee to the east. He leaves 10 concubines. These are, not wives, but they're, people that have been with the king, and they're concubines with David there. He leaves them behind to care for the house. Which he probably takes all the rest of his wives and all the rest of his concubines. You can think about the size of David's household, right, with him. His servants pass on before him. His personal guard passes on before him. Those are some of the Cherethites and the Pelethites. And then even Ittai the Gittite, possibly from Gath, and his men go with him. And David's like, "Oh, you just came. You don't have to come." So this is kind of a test of loyalty. Ittai passes with flying colors and comes with David. It's also a chance for David. He shows his compassion to this guy. It's like, you just came. You don't need to take yourself into exile, even though you just arrived. And he says, "No, wherever the king goes, that's where I'll go." It sounds very much reminiscent of Ruth, doesn't it? In the midst of those things, where you go, I will go. Your gods will be my gods. Your people, my people, and so it just has that very striking same sense of that. I want to show a couple pictures just to give us a sense of what's going on here. So this is a picture of Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. And so if you can see kind of the different things sticking up over here in the distance, if you see this little gold dome right in the middle, my cursor is pointing to it. So that gold dome right in the middle, that's the Temple Mount. That would not have been that in David's day. That was just a threshing floor. The city proper in David's day would have been to the left of that. Everything to the left side, going down the ridge this way, is where the city of David was. And then it goes down into the steep valley and up the other side. The brook Kidron, it runs through the bottom of that valley. That's the Kidron Valley. See if there's a better shot there. Let me show you a different screen just to show you the bottom of the Kidron Valley. So this one, I'm now standing, the Mount of Olives is up and to the left behind me. That corner of this here is the corner of the Temple Mount as it stands today, as it would have been in Jesus' day. And so as I'm looking, so that corner and beyond is where the city of David is. So David would have passed down in front of us and then up the Mount of Olives to the left of us with his entourage as he's going. So it's not a super long distance that these people are coming out of Jerusalem to get to the Mount of Olives where David is at, where David is fleeing to the east. To the east and beyond is the wilderness of Judea. And then it goes, you go through some rough, rugged terrain, and then eventually make a steep descent down to the Jordan River Valley, to the city of Jericho, and then cross on beyond the Jordan River to the other side. That's where David is going.
Pastor?
One second.
Pastor? Yeah.
So they're not hiding there. They're trying to, the question was, where would they hide? David is fleeing across the Jordan River to the other side of the Jordan River. So they're going out of the city of David, out of Jerusalem, up the Mount of Olives to the east, all the way towards the Jordan River and beyond is where they're going to hide. Somewhere in the land of Israel, but beyond the Jordan. They actually end up in the same place that Saul's son sets up his reign in Mannheim or near there. And so it's far enough, it's a distance, there's separation there. Yeah, Richard, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, you may have said it when we were on a trip there, what was approximate size? We stayed in Old Jerusalem, and it seemed to me the size of Old Jerusalem geographically was not all that large. What was it?
And the reality is the size of David's Jerusalem was even smaller than it is today, Richard. I think we're talking about 2,000 to 5,000 people in David's day, where today where like Jesus' day it was more like 20,000. So not a huge city by our standards. But again, this is, more the old world standards. So it was a decent city population there. All right. Okay, let's keep going. I'm going to go ahead and read this next section, 24 through 31. And Abiathar came up, and behold, Zadok came also with all the Levites, bearing the ark of the covenant of God. And they set down the ark of God until the people had passed out of the city. Then the king said to Zadok, carry the ark of God back into the city. If I find favor in the eyes of the Lord, he will bring me back and let me see both it and his dwelling place. But if he says, I have no pleasure in you, behold, here I am. Let him do to me what seems good to him. The king also said to Zadok the priest, are you not a seer? Go back to the city in peace with your two sons, Ahimaaz your son, and Jonathan the son of Abiathar. See, I will wait at the fords of the wilderness until the word comes from you to inform me. So Zadok and Abiathar carried the ark of God back to Jerusalem, and they remained there. But David went up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, weeping as he went, barefoot and with his head covered. And all the people who were with him covered their heads, and they went up, weeping as they went. And it was told David, Ahithophel is among the conspirators with Absalom. And David said, O Lord, please turn the counsel of Ahithophel into foolishness. All right, so David goes up the ascent of the Mount of Olives. And so kind of where I was standing, he would have crossed over and then into the Judean wilderness beyond. Let me see if I have a picture of that. I'm not seeing a picture of that right now, but yeah, the Mount of Olives in general, just that's where David went up and over. And so just again, kind of show a picture of that for us here. Let me share my screen here. Sorry guys, I'm taking a second here with my technology stuff. So, all right, let me share my screen here and just one other picture here. Nope, that's the other one. Sorry. So this will work too. So David over here to the left, where this green patch that's a pretty steep hill, David would have come out of the old city of Jerusalem, down, and then he'd gone up the ascent of the Mount of Olives, maybe near where I was standing right here, to get into the Judean wilderness. And then beyond, down to the fords of the wilderness, which is down near in the Rift Valley, in the Jordan River Valley. All right. Notice here he has the ark and the high priests, Abiathar and Zadok, that come out to meet him. He urges them to remain in Jerusalem. He says, if I find favor with the Lord, I will return and be able to see the ark and its dwelling place again. And then Zadok is to inform David when it's safe to return. So David not only leaves them, he's not like, I'm going to take my toys and go home, right? Take my ball and go home. No, he's leaving the ark of God in its dwelling place. He's not having it move with him. It's for the people. But at the same time, he's being strategic. He leaves the high priest there. They are loyal to David, and they are going to serve as David's spies in Absalom's kingdom. David calls him, refers to him as the king, doesn't he? Because that's what he is for all intents and purposes. He has become the king through a coup, through a power play, power struggle. He's become the king. And so he asks them to stay. And then where David goes to the east, up the Mount of Olives and beyond, down near the Jordan. He's weeping. He's barefoot. His head is covered. He is a man in mourning. He's in grief. This is appropriate here. And he hears that Ahithophel is among the conspirators. He prays that his counsel be turned to foolishness. All right. So this is a picture looking to the east from the Mount of Olives. And so David would have got over the Mount of Olives and had kind of the wilderness before him. Only for a month or two is it ever this green. But it had been desolate, lots of hills and crags and cracks to get lost in. But going to the east, eventually it would go down to the Rift Valley after several miles. It's probably at least a half a day's journey down to Jericho from here. Yeah, Rusty?
In the portals of prayer this week, it talked about the olives, and it said that place means peace.
Okay.
So does that mean that David went there so he could have peace?
No, David went there so he could have life. Yeah, and David didn't stay there, right? As soon as you go over the ridge here, you see there are no trees as you go into the wilderness. Mount of Olives had olive trees on it, but you go farther to the east and everything's desolate. It's in rain shadow. They got with these areas now to the east of this get less than 8 inches of rain a year, and so enough to make it green in the springtime, but beyond that, it's desolate and barren until you get down to the Rift Valley. So, all right. So yeah, David went there to escape and get down and to save his life. All right, let's finish up the chapter here. 32 through 37. How about somebody in the room? Would somebody in the room be willing to read that for us? Yeah, Alan, thank you.
When David arrived at the summit where people used to worship God, Hushai and Archai was there to meet him, his robe torn and dust on his head. David said to him, if you go with me, you will be a burden to me. But if you return to the city and say to Absalom, I will be your servant. I was your father's servant in the past, and now I will be your servant. Then you can help me by frustrating Ahithophel's advice. And the priests Zadok and Abiathar be there with you. Tell them anything you hear in the king's palace. Their two sons, Ahimaaz, son of Zadok, and Jonathan, son of Abiathar, are there with them. Send them to me with anything you hear. So David's friend Hushai arrived at Jerusalem as Absalom was entering the city.
All right, so you have these two parades that are going on here. David's leaving and Absalom's getting ready to come in. David's on the Mount of Olives. Absalom is approaching to the east. Absalom is approaching from the south, from Hebron. One is a victory parade, that's Absalom's. One is almost like a mourning parade. Hushai is another one of David's counselors, David's friends, advisors for many, many years. He comes to David, his clothes are torn, and David says, don't come with me. I need you to go back into the city and be my spy. Frustrate the counsel of Ahithophel, act like you're loyal to Absalom, get in on the inside, be a spy for me. And that's what he does. He turns around and goes back. So Archites, they're non-Israelite members of David's cabinet. So he's not an Israelite, but he is a member of David's cabinet. He's one of his officials, his advisors that's there. He goes and serves Absalom. David asks him to go and serve Absalom so he can counter the advice of Ahithophel. Okay. And so now there's a network of spies in place for David, aren't there? Between Hushai in the palace and between Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, and their sons, David has a network of spies and informants to let him know what's going on in Absalom's regime. He's being discreet. He's using discretion, even as he's on the run here. Okay. All right, let's keep going. Time's sake, I don't want to run out of time, so I'm going to read this next section. When David had passed a little beyond the summit, Ziba, the servant of Mephibosheth, met him. Remember these guys, right? Ziba, Mephibosheth is Jonathan's son who was lame and crippled, who ate at David's table. Ziba was Saul's servant, who David put in charge of his household to care for Mephibosheth. Met him with a couple of donkeys saddled, bearing 200 loaves of bread, 100 bunches of raisins, 100 summer fruits, and a skin of wine. And the king said to Ziba, why have you brought these? Ziba answered, the donkeys are for the king's household to ride on, the bread and summer fruit for the young men to eat, and the wine for those who faint in the wilderness to drink. And the king said, and where is your master's son? He's asking about where Mephibosheth is. Ziba said to the king, behold, he remains in Jerusalem, for he said, today the house of Israel will give me back the kingdom of my father. And the king said to Ziba, behold, all that belongs to Mephibosheth is now yours. And Ziba said, I pay homage. Let me ever find favor in your sight, my lord, the king. So Ziba, he's the servant of the house of Saul. He's taking care of Mephibosheth's property. He brings donkeys and supplies for David and his people. He's coming from the north, from Gibeah. That's where Saul's hometown was, a couple miles away. And he's bringing that to supply David. He says, Mephibosheth is remaining behind to hopefully regain the kingdom. That's what Ziba says. We'll find out in a couple chapters next time that that's not reality. Right? So even in his kindness, he has an ulterior motive. And David gives Ziba all that was Mephibosheth's, which he had already been the steward of, right? He'd been taking care of it with his sons, Saul's property. David, he feels like he's been betrayed by Mephibosheth because that's what Ziba implied. And so he gives Ziba all of the land and property, which is exactly what he was hoping for. Okay. All right. So David keeps meeting these people on the road. Now he's going to meet another one. How about somebody online? Can you read for us verses 5 through 14 of chapter 16? Go ahead, Richard.
Well,
5 through 14.
yeah, 5 is not, here it is. Okay. When the king came to Bahiram, when King David came to Bahiram, there came out of a man of the family of the house of Saul, whose name was Shimei, the son of Gera. And as he came, he cursed continually. He threw stones at David and all the servants of the king of David. And all the people and all the Almighty, just a moment. King David and all the people and all the Almighty men were on his right hand and on his left. And Shimei said, as he cursed, get out, you man of blood, you worthless man. The Lord has avenged on you all the blood of the house of Saul, in whose place you have reigned, and the king has given the kingdom into the hand of your son Absalom. So your evil on you, for you are a man of blood. Then Abishai, the son of Zeruiah, said to the king, why should this dead dog curse my lord the king? Let me go over and take off his head. But the king said, what have I to do with you, you sons of Zeruiah? Zeruiah, I guess it's
Zariah, yep.
Zeruiah.
Zariah is
Yeah,
great.
and okay, and if he is cursing because the Lord has said to him, curse David, who then shall say, why have you done so? And David said to Abishai and all his servants, behold, my own son seeks my life. How much more now may this Benjamite leave him alone and let him curse, for the Lord has told him to. It may be that the Lord will look on the wrong done to me, and that the Lord will repay with good for his cursing today. So David and his men went on the road, while Shimei went along the hillside opposite him, and cursed as he went, and threw stones at him and flung dust. And the king and all the people who were with him arrived weary at Jordan, and there he refreshed himself.
All right, thank you so much, Richard. All right, so kind of along the road, they meet this guy named Shimei. He's of the house of Saul, right? So there's no love lost here, probably between him and David, even before this time. He's a Benjamite. This place where they're talking about is between Judah and Benjamin. He curses David. He throws rocks at them and dust at them. He humiliates them. He insults them. He says David deserves all of this because of what David did to the house of Saul, that David's a man of blood, that this is justice coming back upon David's head. David doesn't stop him. David takes the abuse. He says, it may be from the Lord. Maybe this is what I deserve. And I'm not going to speak out against if this is, he's my own son wants to seek my life. If my own son seeks my life, why wouldn't this Benjaminite want to treat me this way as well? Abishai, remember who Abishai is? Abishai is Joab's brother. Joab is the commander of the army. Joab and Abishai and Asahel, they were the sons of Zeruiah. These are the guys that are constantly taking matters into their own hands. They're the ones that had Abner killed for killing. Abishai and Joab killed Abner, Saul's general, because they killed their brother. They're always the ones that are taking action and seeking blood and vengeance in the midst of this. And David says, what have I to do with you?
They're David's nephews.
David's nephews. Yeah, David's nephews. Abishai or Zeruiah is his sister. David's nephews, but they're part of that inner circle, and there's constantly this tension between them. Abishai wants to kill him. David restrains him, and he says that if it's from the Lord, so be it. If not, the Lord may repay me good for the evil that he's enduring today. And so he lets him be, and mistakes and endures the punishment. All right, if David returns, is this going to be a problem for Shimei? Yeah, because if the king returns, he's just cursed and insulted the rightful king, right? If he doesn't return, does he get his vengeance or maybe feels better about what David did to Saul's house or what he perceived there? Maybe. All right. So let's. Oh yeah, go ahead, Deb.
If I'm remembering right, David does return, but he doesn't do anything to Shimei. He lets Solomon take care of him.
Yeah, so he gives mercy and grace to this man when he does return, but when Solomon finally becomes king, David says, watch this guy. And basically Solomon gives him terms to say, if you leave this city, I believe this is the guy, if you leave the city, you'll be killed. But if you stay in the city, then you'll be all right. He ends up chasing after a couple slaves and he's killed because he leaves the city for it. If I'm remembering the right person there. All right, let's keep going on. Now we switch. We followed David. David's has come to the Jordan River. They're still on the Jerusalem side of the Jordan River. They haven't crossed over yet. They're weary. You got that? They're weary. They're despondent. His household, his guard, they're distressed. They're in mourning. They're in disarray. That's David's camp. That's how it's described. Verse 15 and following. Now Absalom and all the people, the men of Israel, came to Jerusalem, and Ahithophel with him. And when Hushai the Archite, David's friend, came to Absalom, Hushai said to Absalom, "Long live the king! Long live the king!" And Absalom said to Hushai, "Is this your loyalty to your friend? Why did you not go with your friend?" And Hushai said to Absalom, "No, for whom the Lord and this people and all the men of Israel have chosen, his I will be, and with him I will remain. And again, whom should I serve? Should it not be his son? As I've served your father, so I will serve you." Then Absalom said to Ahithophel, "Give your counsel. What shall we do?" Ahithophel said to Absalom, "Go into your father's concubines, whom he has left to keep the house. And all Israel will hear that you have made yourself a stench to your father, and the hands of all who are with you will be strengthened." So they pitched a tent for Absalom on the roof. And Absalom went into his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. Now in those days, the counsel that Ahithophel gave was if one consulted the word of God. So was all the counsel of Ahithophel esteemed, both by David and by Absalom. So how does Hushai enter Absalom's service? He says basically, I'm not David's servant. I'm the servant of the king, whoever the king is. I'm loyal to the crown, in other words. And so as I served David when he was king, now I'll serve you. And so Absalom buys it, and he allows Hushai to enter into his service as one of his advisors, just as he was to David. What does Absalom do? On the advice of Ahithophel, he sleeps with his father's concubines in the sight of all Israel. This is symbolizing the taking of David's women, David's wives, and thereby he's now taking David's power, right? David is powerless to stop it, so I'm taking his power, his household, his wives. He's saying, I've taken the king's place. This also makes himself a stench to David. Basically, reconciliation. Absalom has made all but impossible here. You can't come back from this, is the other kind of thing here. And Ahithophel is saying, if as you do this, all of your allies are going to be strengthened because of your boldness. They know that you are making this a path of no return, that you're in this 100%. You're not just going to go part way and then go make peace with David. You are in this 100%, and it's going to strengthen your allies in the midst of this because they're going to see your strength of resolve. And then we see and know this is also judgment from the Lord. Back in chapter 12, verse 11, back to 12, verse 11, Nathan the prophet says, "Thus says the Lord, behold, I will raise up evil against you from out of your own house, and I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun, for you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun." All right, so this fulfills the prophecy that God made through Nathan, the consequences of David's actions. Now, does that mean Absalom is not accountable for his sins in this matter? No, Absalom is still 100% accountable. Just because the Lord knew it was going to happen as a consequence for David's sin doesn't mean that he caused it or that Absalom had no choice in the matter. Absalom is still 100% accountable for his own sins, and even as he lies with David's concubines, his wives, in the sight of the sun, in the sight of all people. So Absalom is doing this sinful, despicable thing. You are not to sleep with your father's wives. That was one of the commands in the book of Moses, books of Moses. Okay. All right, so let's keep going on. We've gotten now through the first two chapters we need to cover today. We're going to go into the last chapter. And so would somebody online be willing to read for us chapter 17, verses 1 through 14? So a couple, 3 paragraphs here. 1 through 14.
I can read, Pastor.
Thank you.
Moreover, Ahithophel said to Absalom, let me choose 12,000 men, and I will arise and pursue David tonight. I will come upon him while he is weary and discouraged and throw him into a panic, and all the people who are with him will flee. I will strike down only the king, and I will bring all the people back to you as a bride comes home to her husband. You seek the life of only one man, and all the people will be at peace. And the advice seemed right in the eyes of Absalom and all the elders of Israel. And then Absalom said, call Hushai and Archite also, and let us hear what he has to say. When Hushai came to Absalom, Absalom said to him, thus has Ahithophel spoken, and shall we do as he says? If not, you speak. Then Hushai said to Absalom, the counsel that Ahithophel has given is not good. Hushai said, you know that your father and his men are mighty men, and that they are enraged, like a bear robbed of her cubs in the field. Besides, your father is expert in war. He will not spend the night with the people. Behold, even now he has hidden himself in one of the pits or in some other place. And as soon as some of the people fall at the first attack, whoever hears it will say, there has been a slaughter among the people who follow Absalom. Then even the valiant men, whose heart is like that of the heart of a lion, will utterly melt with fear. All Israel knows that your father is a mighty man, and that those who are with him are valiant men. But my counsel is that all Israel be gathered to you, from Dan to Beersheba, as the sand by the sea for multitude, and that you go to battle in person. So we shall come upon him in some place where he is to be found. We shall light upon him as the dew falls on the ground, and on him, and of him, and all the men with him, not one will be left. If he withdraws into a city, then all Israel will bring ropes to that city, and we shall drag it into the valley until not even a pebble is to be found there. And Absalom and all the men of Israel said, the counsel of Hushai the Archite is better than the counsel of Ahithophel, for the Lord has ordained to defeat the good counsel of Ahithophel, so that the Lord might bring harm upon Absalom.
Thank you very much. So let's unpack that a little bit. So the counsel of Ahithophel, he says, tonight, give me a small force. And it's not so small, but give me a small force, 12 fighting units of men. And let me go down. David's men are tired, they're exhausted, they're unorganized, and we will assassinate David. Because David's the only one there that's a threat to us. We take out David, everybody else will turn now and follow you, Absalom. And they're like, oh, that's good counsel. All right. And so it was probably, if Absalom was to succeed, this was the right counsel. David did not have time to organize. His men were exhausted. David had not even camped. They were still on the Jerusalem side of the Jordan River. They weren't in safety or any of those things. Absalom says, well, we got Hushai here too. Let's see what he has to say. And Hushai gives a different counsel. He says, well, you know how strong David's mighty men are. You know how they're men of valor. And you know how crafty David is and how well he hides and knows the area. As soon as they hear something, David's going to hide. You're not going to be able to kill David. And more than that, these mighty men will rout or defend themselves. And so you're going to suffer an immediate defeat and not obtain the target of killing David. What's better is that you gather the army from all Israel, and Absalom, you lead them out yourself, and you go against David and his men and completely wipe them out. That way, everyone will see and know that you are the true and rightful king in Israel. Right? The second one plays to his vanity a little bit. Do you see that? Because who gets the credit for the victory in the first version? Well, Ahithophel and maybe the small force. Who's the center of the second of Hushai's advice? It's all about Absalom. his leadership, his drawing the people together, his marching against David, his destroying and defeated David and all his mighty men and wiping them out completely. That's the counsel that seems good to all of these, to Absalom and all the leaders of Israel. And it's also, David's prayer was answered here. He said, frustrate the counsel of Ahithophel as he's going out. And he sends Hushai back and does just that. They listen to him in the midst of that. The Lord brings that about. All right, so that's what happens. They listen to Hushai. And so now we have David still stuck kind of not in a not so good place. They're waiting to see what's going to happen. Verses 15 through 22. Then Hushai said to Zadok and Abiathar, the priests, thus and so did Ahithophel counsel Absalom, the elders of Israel, and thus and so I counseled. Now therefore send quickly to tell David, do not stay tonight at the fords of the wilderness, but by all means pass over, lest the king and all the people who are with him will be swallowed up. Now Jonathan and Ahimaaz were waiting in Rogel. A female servant was to go and tell them, and they were to go and tell King David, for they were not to be seen entering the city. But a young man saw them and told Absalom. So both of them went away quickly and came to the house of a man at Bahiram, who had a well in his courtyard, and they went down into it. And the woman took and spread a covering over the well's mouth and scattered grain on it, and nothing was known of it. When Absalom's servants came to the woman at the house, they said, where are Ahimaaz and Jonathan? The woman said to them, they have gone over the brook of the water. And when they had sought and could not find them, they returned to Jerusalem. After they had gone, the men came up out of the well and went and told King David. They said to David, arise and go quickly over the water, and thus and so as Ahithophel counseled against you. Then David arose and all the people who were with him, and they crossed over the Jordan. By daybreak, not one was left who had not crossed over. All right. So David hears the plans. Hushai tells Zadok and Abiathar. They tell a woman who tells their sons who are waiting outside the city because they can't come in. Right. So it'd be a great movie, wouldn't it? I mean, just the plot, the intrigue, the subtlety, the stealthiness, all of those kinds of things. The woman hides them in a well, covers a blanket over it, puts grain on it, so it looks just like the rest of the courtyard. They're able to flee and escape. She covers for them, right? She literally conceals them. So she covers them, kind of fun play on words. They go and tell David, who crosses over the Jordan to safety. So even though Ahithophel's plan wasn't put into action, whether or not Hushai told them of these things before a thing was decided, we don't know, but there's still the possibility that they could act on it and come after David. So they cross over the Jordan to safety because an army now has to pass through the Jordan in order to capture them or attack them or kill them. Okay. All right. Let's finish the last section and then we can talk about it a little bit here. How about somebody in the room to read 23 through the end of the chapter? Ron, thank you.
When Ahithophel saw that his counsel was not followed, he saddled his donkey and went home to his own city. He set his house in order and hanged himself, and he died and was buried in the tomb of his father. Then David came to Mahanaim, and Absalom crossed the Jordan with all the men of Israel. Now Absalom had set Amasa over the army instead of Joab. Amasa was the son of a man named Ithra, the Ishmaelite, who had married Abigail, the daughter of Nahash, sister of Zeruiah, Joab's mother. And Israel and Absalom encamped in the land of Gilead. When David came to Mahanaim, Shaul, the son of Nahash from Ammah, well, I didn't know this was going to be here, of the Ammonites, and Machir, the son of Amiel from Lo-Debar, and Barzillai, the Gilead from Rogelim, brought beds, basins, and earthen vessels, wheat, barley, flour, parched grain, beans, and lentils, honey and curds and sheep and cheese from the herd for David and the people with him to eat. For they said, the people are hungry and weary and thirsty in the wilderness.
All right, great. So David's men flee to Mahanaim. This is the same place opposite, on the other side of the Jordan River. This is the same place that Saul's son, Ishbosheth, had set up his kingdom. David flees near the same area. These are places in the Transjordan who have defeated him, that are around him, the Ammonites, etc., that come and help him. And even this man comes and brings him food to take care of, he and his family. So David has a respite, a refuge, a safety place there in the Transjordan, across the Jordan River in Mahanaim, this eastern part of Israel. Absalom and Ahithophel, what do? Well, Ahithophel, he kills himself. All right, so he is the one that has the wise counsel, like as of the Lord. He sees when his advice isn't taken, that the coup is doomed to fail. Now, you could read that one of two ways. One, he is so arrogant to think that he is 100% going to be right, and he doesn't even need to see the outcome of that. Or he is just that wise to know and see the outcomes of this, of what's going to happen, and knows that he will not survive it if he stays alive. So he takes matters into his hand, not what he's supposed to do. He knows he's going to be punished or worse, and so he kills himself. Absalom, he amasses an army and puts it under Amasa's leadership. So this is Joab's cousin-in-law, or David's nephew-in-law. He's married to David's sister's daughter, is who this guy is married to. So this is David's sister's daughter, a different one than Zariah. And so Amasa is married to Joab's cousin. So it's still part of David's family. Again, Absalom is part of David's family, right? He puts Amasa in charge of the army, and he gathers in Gilead. That's also on the other side of the Jordan River. And he brings the army there, and he's set to go against David and the remnants, his guard and army that are gathered around him. All right. And that's kind of where we end this chapter, this session today, as far as reading scripture. We're going to talk about a few other things. So civil war in the land of Israel. David's son successfully gets a coup. The only part that doesn't go right is David escapes. And so now he has to try to take care of David. He doesn't immediately go after him with a small force, but he is going after David with a large army to try to wipe out all that are with David. And so that's going to happen on the other side of the Jordan River, the east side of the Jordan River. That's what we're going to talk about next week as we go through those things in the midst of that. Any questions before we get into some of the questions, application questions here at the end? Yeah, well.
I know that Absalom ingratiated himself to the people with the way he was behaving at the beginning of these chapters, but it's still hard for me to believe that by the end here, he was able to amass such an army to go against David, that there wasn't a greater loyalty considering David was such a popular king.
Yeah, so it's not that everyone is going, it makes it sound like all Israel is going out to him, but there is enough of an army when this battle is actually fought from David's side too, to make it a legit battle, not just a one-sided rout by Absalom's men. And so you're also probably talking about generational differences here. If David is closer to 60, he's been reigning a long time. David conquered and made us safe, but what have you done for me lately? And that's where Absalom really has undermined him. David can't even judge you guys well. And that's where he's really undermined the rule and the leadership. We need new leadership. We need a new generation. We need somebody else that's going to be a person of action. I'm that person. And that's attractive if things have stagnated or appear to be stagnated for a while. in a country or in government. You know, there's always, in our own political climate, there's always the, sometimes it goes with the incumbent and people stay. And sometimes there's a point in time where the incumbent, it doesn't matter who they are, gets overrun and overturned. There's these periods of flow in our own politics as well. Doesn't matter which party, that we see those things as well. Yeah, Alan?
I find it interesting that a lot of the tribes that continue to support David were actually not Israelites.
Yeah.
They were Philistines.
Philistines or Ammonites or others, people that he'd conquered, right?
Right, so they were former enemies. And
Yeah.
I guess I take from that the way God works, he uses different people, not necessarily all good Christians, to accomplish his will.
Yeah, so God's will is going to accomplish and not always who we think it's going to be or how we would write it. Even Hushai is not an Israelite, right? And he's the one that God uses to frustrate the council of Absalom in the midst of that. And so at this point, I would say these people that are following David, they're at least probably proselytes. They're believing, they're worshiping as the Israelites do, but they're not on the in crowd. They're not Israelites themselves. Yeah. Other thoughts or questions? All right. Well, let's kind of look at the last couple of questions. If there are on the study guide, if there are more questions that you have, that's great. So how does this experience humble David? So I'll just throw that out to you guys. I want to answer that right away. How does this experience humble David? If you're online or in person, any thoughts or questions or answers to that? How does this experience humble David?
His own son tried to take him down.
His own son tries to take him down. How else? Great, Richard. Thanks. You're going to start it. Yeah, Mom?
I was thinking of this food offering at the end. He's actually kind of like, why are you doing this? Why are you being so kind to me?
Yeah. So he's placed into a position of a beggar, and not only by Ziba, but now by these other people. He has to accept the help of others to support himself and his household.
He's not in control.
He's not in control. His concubines have been taken from him, and publicly he's been humiliated, where his son has slept with his concubines in the presence, in the sight of all Israel. Not in control.
Well,
yeah, go ahead.
Even as he's walking away and leaving the country, they're throwing rocks and stones at him, which is not exactly what you would expect for homage to a king.
Yeah, he's getting, instead of praises and adoration, he's having stones and dirt flung at him. Yeah. Which is interesting, by the way, is the same place, the same road that he is having stones and dirt flung at him. It's likely the same road that Jesus enters the donkey coming the other way, where he does have praises and palm branches strewn before him. Kind of an interesting twist there. Yeah, Rusty? Microphone's coming.
It seemed like the prophet Nathan come true. So David's getting what he deserved for
Dave, this is definitely a consequence of David's prior actions, right? David's sin has been atoned for. His guilt doesn't remain with him, but that doesn't mean that consequences aren't following him, right? Yeah. But how is God still providing for him? I think we talked about it. He provides donkeys and food. He provides shelter, beds, a safe place. God even provides a counsel through Hushai to redirect the good counsel of Ahithophel. So Absalom chooses what's not wise or not the best. God is still faithful to David, even as David's being humbled. And then what do you think God's teaching David here?
Maybe
Can't do it on his own. Well, go ahead, Lois.
Maybe that God is still in control. You may think you have power and authority, but you have neglected to honor me as the supreme authority.
God's still in control, and even when you mess up, I'm still in control. I think maybe he is teaching some humility here as well. Yeah, other thoughts? He's also teaching David his mercy. David knows he doesn't deserve any of this, but yet God is still providing for him and has spared his life. Yeah, not an easy
Pastor, when
lesson.
they speak of,
Yeah, go ahead, Richard.
I'm sorry, excuse me. When they speak of, in this chapters, David having a lot of blood on his hands, are they speaking particularly of what he did to Bathsheba's husband to have him murdered? Or are they talking about his previous military campaigns which was the command of God, I think, most all the time?
Yeah, I think that's Shimei. That's who's saying David has blood on his hands. I think he particularly is not talking about Uriah, Bathsheba's husband. He's not talking about his military campaigns. I think he's talking about, he blames David for the actions of what happened to Saul's household, where, if you remember, Ishbosheth was murdered in his bed, and Abner was killed on the road by Joab and Abishai. I think that's what the blood that's on David's hands, the blood that took out Saul's household. I think that's what Shemaiah is saying, which is ironic because David actually had nothing to do with any of those deaths. He had blood in his hand from other places, but I think what Shemaiah is referring to is what happened to Saul's household. Interesting, where the one place where David's actually innocent is where he's being accused here by this man. Yeah. So great question. Ron?
I'm impressed that you can look at this whole story in two different ways. You can look at it through the eyes of faith or not. So on one hand, boy, wasn't David clever? He sent these spies and he did this and he did that. And the woman, was helpful with covering the well and all that. But on the other hand, with the eyes of faith, we see that God was helping those plans of David to prosper and to actually work out the way that God wanted it to.
Yeah.
Which I guess you could say, you could draw the application to our lives too, because, we don't see great magic things happening, God working in our life with pillars of fire and all that stuff. But he's working in our lives through what seemed to be, from one point of view, just human things.
Yeah. And I think so. Thanks for making that connection and parallel, Ron. I think so often we can see, we don't see God's hand in things too often. It's so easy for us to overlook that and just say, well, that was another day, and man, these stressful things happened, and well, thankfully this happened, or wasn't that great coincidence that this came this way, or just that it happened to line up so that it worked out in the end. And that's how we can tend to look at life often. But really, with the eyes of faith, as Ron talking about, we take a step back and we can see, wow, I was in the midst of that struggle, in the midst of those things, and I was trying to do the best I could. But what's amazing is how God continued to work through that and lead me to where I am today. Even in the midst of the struggles of my poor choices and maybe some good ones, God led and guided me to here into this place. And so, yeah, I think there's always our human story, but there's always the overarching story of God's love, mercy, and grace that points to Jesus ultimately and the salvation that he has for us. But then even as that filters down into our everyday life, where God leads and guides us in the midst of those things. Yeah, thanks for that. Other thoughts? The last question there, and maybe, we talk about God's discipline. That's part of, I think, what he was doing with David is teaching him. Anytime you're teaching, that's disciplining, that's discipling, right? And so what place does God's discipline have in our lives? And how is this discipline of God meaningful for us? Yeah, go to my mom here first.
I was thinking about the correlation between discipline and parenting. When God gives us children, part of our charge to those children is to raise them up in the Lord, but to discipline them. I think a lot of times people get confused with when a child does wrong, then you seek out or you set the path forward to discipline. But but then they forgive so quickly and then remove a consequence. And I see that in David over and over again. Every single thing that has come back to haunt him seems to be aligned with his inability to carry discipline through with his own children, with people in his staff. And because of that, now there's this whole big problem. Obviously, well, maybe not obviously, it seems as though possibly with his own children as they were young and growing, he didn't follow through with discipline. And it just strikes me as being interesting and should further maybe our own charge with our own children.
Yeah, and you look at how God did with David. God forgave David immediately when David repented of his sin with Bathsheba and killing Uriah, but he didn't necessarily remove the consequence. That was still disciplining him and teaching him in the midst of those things. The guilt was gone. God didn't hold him accountable for that anymore. He forgave him, but there was still consequence that was there. And I think that's maybe what you're alluding to too, is where David didn't necessarily have that line. Well, I'm either going to forgive him 100% or I'm going to punish him 100%, where it's like, no, you're kind of doing both, where I'm forgiving you, but there still is this consequence because of this. Interesting thought. And I think as we look at the Lord with that, the Lord uses difficult times in our lives to teach us, to help us grow to him. Difficult times in my life are what helped me develop a better habit and discipline of prayer. When things are going really well in my life, it's easy to neglect that. And it was easy to neglect that, but through that discipline of those difficult things in my life, of where I need to be talking with God and laying that before him, that habit and that discipline of prayer was developed in me. And so God uses those things that develop to discipline us to carry us forward. Yeah. Doesn't mean, go ahead, Rusty.
What your mom was just saying, I just wonder about the mothers of Absalom and the other guy who got killed by Absalom. I mean, when David took his family with him, did he take the mother of Absalom with him too? Or, I mean, how would you feel like if that was your son who tried to kill the king? I mean, it just seems.
Yeah, we know he took his household with him, but we don't know if she's still alive or any of those kinds of things. We just don't know. Yeah. It's an interesting question, Rusty. We just don't know. Yeah. Yeah, and we aren't told what the home life of David was like, but you can imagine with the discord amongst the kids, there's probably equal discord amongst his wives. Yeah. All right. Any other thoughts, questions especially for anybody online? I know I don't want to neglect you guys if there was something that you guys had. Okay. Well, let's close with prayer, and then feel free to talk and share as after that as well. Heavenly Father, thank you for today. Lord, thank you for sending your son. Thank you for being faithful to us, even in the midst of our struggles. Lord, when difficult things go on in our life, when we face discipline, help us to learn and grow from that, to seek you, to strive for you in the midst of those things. Lead us, guide us. We thank you for the forgiveness that's been won in Jesus, that punishment's been taken. So we don't have to fear death or hell, but Lord, in the midst of the trials, strengthen us and be with us. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your day.
Jean, I just wanted to ask you how your grant writing is going. I know you've been writing grants lately. How's that going?
It's slowed down a lot
Has it?
because of the virus. Yeah.
Do you still have one more package that you're sending out to your college kids?
I'm glad you asked that. I sent the last one out this week.
Did you send them supplies for the end of the year like we usually do?
No, they got snacks.
Oh, that's good. You need snacks while you are studying for those finals, for sure.
I
Yeah.
heard on the news that like Mizzou and other colleges are going to be spreading out the graduations during weekends in April and May. So there's not a whole bunch of people in one spot. So I figured, well, I better get that package in the mail before they graduate. I got some graduating in April.
Oh, wow. That does seem early.
Yeah, they're
Gosh.
spreading out those graduations, which I think is a good idea.
Yeah. Well, I know we've stuck with our regular schedule, which is right after Easter, getting that final package sent out. So maybe we should rethink that. I don't know. We'll
Well,
have to.
I'm assuming these graduations in April, probably like mid-April, late April.
Uh-huh. Okay, well, we'll see. Maybe we've already sent our last package out. I don't know. But one really gratifying thing did happen. We got a thank you note through Larry back to the committee about how much they appreciated our last package, and it's really been a blessing for them. So it was really nice, you know.
That's great. I haven't received the thank you note. I got a thank you on email, but that's better than nothing.
Well, no, it was through email.
Okay.
It was through email. So, but still to get, you know, it was just really a sweet message. And we hear things from the parents often, as you know, about how much the kids like it. But to hear something from a college student like that, it was nice. Very nice.
Because typically you don't hear anything back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I only sent out 3 packages because the women's group didn't have their big fundraiser, which is the fall bazaar because of the virus. And no social outreach is in the church budget at Emmanuel Wentzville. So the women's group are the ones that are paying for the postage and the contents of the packages. So that's why I only sent out 3 because they're hurting their budget.
Yeah, we were a little concerned because our boxes the last time were pretty big. I'll send you a couple of pictures that I took of us putting everything in the boxes. And Patty got us this huge roll of bubble wrap.
Oh,
because we sent the mugs and then the mug cake mixes. And so we were afraid those mugs might get broken in the mail. And we had an assembly line going. I'll send you a couple pictures, but it was fun.
Yeah.
It was.
Yeah, the biggest cost is always the postage.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Very true. But
Alyssa's been finished. Well, she finishes her master course this week. Then she signed up for her courses in summer and fall. And then she's been doing DoorDash also.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, she gets quite good tips doing DoorDash. But people should be tipping well.
Yeah. Goodness, she is so busy. I can't imagine doing all of that.
Yeah.
And she's still working at Boeing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. My gosh. She must have more hours in her day than most people. Sounds like
guess she requires little sleep. I don't know.
Well, at her age, probably. Yeah. But anyway, it's good to hear she's doing well. And every time I hear more bad news about Boeing, I just cringe. I just, you know, so many people around here work for Boeing, and it seems like they always have bad news.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Are things falling in place for Marielle for her wedding?
I think so. Everything seems to be going pretty well. I know she sent out her invitations this week, at least most of them on email, which was different. I don't know how I really felt about that, but it's got its good and bad points, I guess. Yeah. I know my sister-in-law said, those invitations were so pretty. And I tried to print one out, but I don't have color on my
Oh,
printer
uh-huh.
and, so it didn't, I guess you wanted a keepsake, which is, a
Right.
lot of people like the invitations for keepsakes. So I don't know. I try, I mean, she's going to be 30 in September, if you can believe that. But so I try to just kind of let them lead the way as much as possible. And,
Uh-huh.
It's her wedding. So,
Right.
but Ruth, how are you doing?
Very slowly. I'm still very, very full of water. We adjusted some medicine Monday and said I should have a suitcase ready to go to the hospital this coming Monday.
And
I'm
well,
not terribly happy about going. It's a very difficult treatment if they do it. And I got so sick with one round of full medicine that it's very scary for me.
well, I know you're in all of our prayers already, but we'll
Thank
special
you.
prayers for you.
I
Special
don't
prayers.
mind doing it slowly. And my doctor was willing to work with me, my heart doctor. I was very pleased about that. I won't be at church. I'm taking medicine morning and afternoon dosages. So to try to get it off, and it doesn't want to come off easy. So I don't understand it either. He thinks my AFib is what has got the valve in the condition it is. Because I was identified with AFib back in 2004. And it is a kind of a more of the continual type. It's not an on again, off again type of thing. So I'm at home and moving. It's bothering my right knee so bad. It's very, very difficult to walk. So I'm here at home. I am here at home. That is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Janice, how are you doing?
Fine. I just had a sleepless night last night, so I'm a little slow today, but not a big deal.
It looks like you're in the Garden of Gethsemane.
I am word studying John in my my Wednesday morning class, and we were talking about the garden, and Jesus, we're right at the part Jesus went into the Garden of Gethsemane. So I put that up as a background.
Nice. Nice. Now, Janice, you've had both of your shots already. Is that correct?
No, I get the second one March 19th.
Okay.
So not too far off now. I mean, the 8th will be on Monday, so it's coming right along.
Great. Great. Yeah, I've had one also. I think my second one is the 20th.
Did
So
your arm
it's
get sore?
just a tiny bit, really no more sore than the flu shot, but I did get the Moderna, and I understand that's worse on your second one. So we'll see how it goes.
Well, I got Pfizer, and they also say on Pfizer the second one is worse.
Yeah.
So my arm was not good for a while. I mean, it was like 4 days. In fact, there's a tiny bit, but only if you touch it and push on it, where before it was feverish and it really was really sore. So I'm hoping the second one won't be as bad on me.
Yeah. Now, my sister-in-law said to move your arm. I guess it's with any shot, but the more you move your arm, it will take away some soreness. And she asked the nurse, and the nurse said, yes, that's true. And I had never heard that before. So I tried to move my arm a lot.
I do.
Down
I always do when I get a shot. I move it a lot, and I'm careful. But I didn't do this one, and with the arm up over the head, and that's the one that really hurt.
Okay.
That's the movement that would hurt the worst. And I do an exercise every day with doing this, and I cut it out for a few days to
Mhm.
give it time to heal.
Yeah.
And I'm bad about taking medicine. I just don't do it, and I should. And I thought, well, finally I said, why am I suffering through this? I'm going to take a Tylenol. They say it's fine to take
Yeah.
a Tylenol. So
Yeah, they do. They do say that, but not before your shot. Don't take it
correct.
before. Wait until you have the pain. Not a prophylactic type thing, but anyway, good to see everybody.
Yeah.
And, everybody have a great day, and
You
we'll
too.
see you next week, I guess.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Take it easy, Ruth.
Yeah.